Mr. Doval came on board and he addressed us, and he said that let there be no misgivings in your mind, that you've been very lucky. Suddenly, a voice came on the PA system. एक बात अपने जहन में अच्छी तरह उतार लीजिए, मौलाना का मसला हल होने के बाद ही, then the voice got disconnected. I just met her and I was passing by in the corridor when I said, hello, Rachna. She says, hello. I said, do you remember me? She says, no. I said, Ic814. And she, grimaced.
It's easy to talk about sacrificing lives when it's not your own life or not your family member's life.
I don't think I would make it back to India alive. Then, what would happen to my family if my body were to come in a coffin or something like that?
Hijackers move between terrifying and then suddenly becoming a little friendly and then terrifying again. It seems to be a very deliberate strategy.
They were trying to, pin us down psychologically.
Apart from being criticized for inaccuracies, the recent series Ic814, the Kandahar Hijack, streaming on Netflix, has resurrected a heated debate around the handling of the crisis that took place in December 1999. While most discussions are centered around India's so-called foreign policy and diplomatic blunders in dealing with the terrorists, very few are talking about the extreme hardship and anxiety that passengers and crew endured in those 7 days, not to mention post-traumatic stress for years to come. One of the references for the Netflix series is a book titled IAS Terror Trail, authored by the chief of cabin crew on the ill-fated flight, Mr. Anil Sharma. We are very grateful to have him join us from Geneva on this episode of Buzz by the Bay. Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, ma'am, for inviting me, and very privileged to be on such a famous show. I've seen some episodes in the past, and very impressed with the kind of research you do and the kind of sensitivity with you approach the issues you have picked up for that particular day.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm grateful. I know you have been giving interviews, and I know it must be quite painful to relive a lot of the memories. And so sorry if I'm adding to that, but I really wanted to address this whole topic from a different viewpoint, because everybody has been talking about, ISI and RNAW and IB and errors made in foreign policy and all these kind of things. But I really want to look at the human angle. I want to look at your book. I've been reading it. And honestly, I must say that it's very well written. It's very gripping. It's also pretty frightening. Reading it makes me a little anxious, so I can't even begin to imagine what you all must have been through. I want to compare the book a little bit with the series, but mainly talk about your personal experience and what was the feeling of the passengers and the crew on that flight and for years to come. This hijacking remains one of the most significant and controversial events in India's aviation history. But do you think that people are, of late in the last 2 weeks since the show has been released, do you think people are sort of overlooking the human angle a bit and focusing too much on the politics and the foreign policy of it?
I think, yes, that's a fair charge that you could sustain against the reaction of the public by and large. And to begin with, I think even that controversy about the names Bhola and Shankar was a little stretched. Why I say that is because, yes, the audience joining the series now would probably not be aware that they were not the real names. So that had to be clarified. I'm not saying that
Yes.
the makers were pretty innocent about it. They should have clarified in the first place. But it is
Right.
also it was not emphasized enough that these were the names which were being used for them on board as well. And then
Right.
now so much energy was lost in pursuing this case, that this part of the series, that, as you rightly said, the focus shifted away from the kind of terror passengers on board were subjected to, the kind of how their will, their courage, and everything associated with the human sentiments was broken step by step.
You're right. That angle, like you said, how systematically the courage and the strength and the will of the passengers was just systematically broken down step by step. I wanted to start with your book, IAS Terror Trail. You know, the book that you have written. Very interestingly, you recount 16 hijacks that happened between 1971 and 1999. There were 16 hijacks. That's some sort of record. I'm not sure that's a record that Indian Airlines, the erstwhile Indian Airlines should be proud of. But what made you embark on this journey, to write about all these hijacks?
When I came back, when we were released on the 31st, and one was just about gathering one's wits, if I may say so. Something terrible happened on my personal front. My father, who was lying paralyzed for 4 years, passed away 6 days after I came back. So
Oh
that was a
God.
double blow that fate delivered to me. But then there were a lot of people around, my relatives, my close family, who supported me during this period. And slowly one started emerging out of it. And there's this chap who he had some publishing firm in Mumbai which wanted to do a book with me. But I told him, I
Yes.
said, I'm not in the right frame of mind. 6 months later, he again said that, right, Anil, anything can be a turning point. That got me thinking. Now, by the time this happened, this was in July 2000, four books had already been released on IC814. And
Right.
the Commander's book came in September 2000. So that made it one too many. And I am there's this ex senior colleague of mine, a brilliant fellow named N. Ramni Iyer. He and I were on a flight, which was a day return flight. We used to call it day return, or quick turnaround, as they say in aviation circles. And I told him, I said, Anna, I want to thinking of writing a book talking about which mentions or describes all the hijackings. He's a do that, and that guy is blessed with a brilliant memory. He rattled out certain dates and the time and the crew who were sort of victims of that incident. Now that was very fascinating. I had had some kind of a foundation immediately to start with. What was playing in my mind, and which is what your question is directed at, was that you know there there are two ways of dealing with a crisis. This is kind of an emotional crisis which affects you to an extent physically as well. That
Right.
you can either labor under the illusion that, okay, oh, I am the only one, I was targeted, fate chose me to undergo this um, you know a crisis of gigantic proportions or something like that. Or you can look around and find that there are a lot of other people also who are undergoing pain in their own
Right.
respective fields. And when I embarked on this journey, I started talking to people. The names that Ramni had mentioned. I found that they were indeed all these years nobody had spoken to them, and nobody had
Right.
chosen to. So that's when I started. And it was then really, as I mentioned in the book, that invisible hand of God guided me. It was a very rewarding journey for me because I felt nice to speak about the pain people had gone through rather than move around in the world thinking that, oh, I am my pain was the greatest of them all. It wasn't like that. You asked me a little while ago that it's a record that no airline would be very proud of. uh, Now, let's put things in perspective. Indian Airlines was the only domestic airline in the skies that time. Air India used to
Yeah.
fly out of uh, India on most routes. I mean, Bombay, New York, Bombay, wherever, Delhi, London, and stuff like that. Now, some of these people, I mean, barring those three, four farcical incidents that happened, but they also did it because they wanted publicity, and this was
Right.
instant publicity. And but there were some very deadly ones as well. I was attending a function where Mr. Jayashankar was addressing us in Geneva, Indian community. And it transpired that his own father was in one of the planes which got hijacked in 1984, Mr. Subramaniam.
Really?
Yes, I mean, the fact that I had written about that episode, and I had, it's one of those very deadly episodes, mind you. I mean, I rate it as one of the five uh, horrific episodes that affected Indian Airlines aircraft, and they were about to ditch in the waters near around Dubai, and
Oh
Mr.
my God.
Subramanian was on board. And I didn't know all these years that his son is the current external affairs minister.
In fact, on the day of recording this episode, you have just come back from meeting the External Affairs Minister.
That's right.
And so he mentioned this episode to you at this meeting.
Yeah, yeah. He also had to say about the series that nobody takes, nobody reads serious history through movies. So don't. He hasn't seen the series, and I guess nor will he because he's a very busy man, obviously. But he says, don't think if they've given you a raw deal, you were not the hero. Somebody else was the hero. He was hinting at, you know what, and the attempt to glorify some people in the aircraft and some of the hijackers. That's sort of it's another debate actually.
Yeah, but that, so he did address this whole issue when you met him today.
Yeah, I had asked him specifically that what's your opinion about the way bureaucracy has been shown. He says I don't take such instances very seriously. I mean, whatever they have to, they says he says a film.
You know, your book, it's clearly sold out because I could not find a physical copy. So clearly, after the series is out and after all these discussions, people are grabbing your book. It's become a bit of a collector's item now.
Yes, it was expected to, because even Mr. Jagia's book, which was written with the in association with the investigative journalist called Saurav Shukl of Indian Express those days, that's and then it's been re-released and doing very well. Physical copies of that are available. We've also been
Okay.
lucky that in the last fortnight, since the series got released, there are about 20 plus copies which have been picked up on Kindle. Apart from the fact that so many people, read pages of it, and then, so all that
Yeah.
is gratifying, of course, monetarily rewarding as well. So it's a good feeling for any author that hard work. I worked 12 years to get all that
Yeah.
material together,
Yes.
and then it was released by
No,
Mr.
true.
Dole, a forward written by him. So it's
Yes, so
been.
I was going to come to that. The forward is by the current National Security Advisor and the chief negotiator at the time, Mr. Ajit Doval. I mean, that's impressive that you have that forward written by him, and it's a brilliantly written forward. Did you have many interactions with Mr. Ajit Doval post this whole hijack, this whole incident, once you all were released?
You know, to be honest, that time when he came and addressed us on the 31st, after the five hijackers that left, and they had established that the three terrorists released by India were the ones whose release they were seeking. So Mr. Doval came on board and he addressed us, and he said that let there be no misgivings in your mind that you've been very lucky to escape a plot very well executed by one of the most dreaded outfits in the region, Lashkar-e-Taiba.
Yeah.
And so, the way he was addressing us, we knew that here is the gentleman. It's only later when we were on board, we came to know that he's Mr. Doval. I didn't know that time. But subsequently, I became a fan of him. I used to read articles written by him in various newspapers. And when Mr. Modi picked him up as a national security advisor, it was
Yeah.
I felt it was a due reward for everything that he'd done for India. But between the period we got released and between the period my book got released in 2014, months before he became the national security advisor, I had met him and I had told him about this, and then he was joking about the 1971 episode and the subsequent episodes where he was in Pakistan. Of course, it was too short a period for me to get too much information out of
Right.
him about. But he said something about ISI involvement, that he met a ISI colonel at not met him. I mean that guy hailed out, Mr. Doval, बहुत दिन से आप पाकिस्तान नहीं आए. So that was his way of saying that
Yeah.
ISI is very much involved. But
Right.
he did come across as somebody who was exceptionally humble. He, when he came to, when I, I almost didn't have the courage to ask him, sir, will it be possible for you to release my book? He says, why not?
That's very nice. I mean, um, definitely he played an important role, and at some level, you must be feeling, "Gosh, I owe my life to this person." I'm just saying maybe that's an exaggerated way of putting it, but I mean, he did play an instrumental role in the way he, I suppose, in the way he
Yes, of course.
negotiated.
He was there for 5. I just asked him, I said, "So when you set out on a mission like that, weren't you sort of scared for life or something?" Because this was Taliban, and we had heard such
Yeah,
terrible things about them. He says, once you worked in police and at that those kind of things, he's, as I said to you, he's very humble. He would never say, "Oh," he says, "then you have no fear of death." And I wish that. Kind of this particular part of that whole episode, which I'm going to talk about, got the attention that it deserved, because it was horrible. On night of 29th, they said that we're going to release some more ladies and children,
right,
and they were taken to what we used to call the J class, the business class in Airbus
yeah,
300. And I went to Mr. Jaggi and asked him, the flight engineer, I said, "Sir, is that a good sign or a bad sign?" Because suddenly the cabin seemed empty. And when there
right,
are fewer people left, obviously it'll be easier for them to, sort of knock them off if the time comes. So he says, "Don't
right,
worry, it's a good sign." But as luck would have it, after some time, something happened, and the same people were herded back into the economy class where they were sitting earlier. And these guys had suddenly, these guys meaning the hijackers, had suddenly become very violent, and they were seemed very enraged.
right.
So, and but one just gave up and sort of accepted that. Then suddenly a voice came on the PA system. एक बात अपने जहन में अच्छी तरह उतार लीजिए, मौलाना का मसला हल होने के बाद ही, then the voice got disconnected. This was the
Uh huh.
chief of the hijackers saying that. And obviously one knew that the negotiations were at a very, very tough stage. Like both sides were playing hard.
Yeah,
But we knew that the hostages mean something, no? They become the bargaining point. So we knew our lives were at stake. And this was proved next morning when they said that talks have failed and we're going to start shooting. If we shoot one, we shoot all. Don't मेरे पास आके कोई, the same burger who's being um, talked about as very human and stuff like that. He said, "मैं एक को मारेंगे तो सबको मारेंगे, मेरे आगे कोई मिन्नत मत करना, और मुझसे कुछ मांगना मत, उम्मीद मत करना."
वो he said मुझसे मत कुछ मांगना मत.
हाँ, मतलब don't plead before me for life, or don't seek any favors from me. I mean, which effectively what he meant was that nobody should believe that I'm a friend to anyone.
My
So,
God.
things had reached that stage. Now, what does this indicate? That if they had to, if God forbid, the government of India had decided not to release this thing, or they had some other plan, these guys would have done something to some of us at least. Okay, I'm not saying that they would have blown up the aircraft. Probably they would have, and who knows what would have happened. But whatever would have happened would have been extremely tragic for people on board and the rest of the country.
Would have been unimaginable tragedy for the people on board, of course. What about their family left behind, who were probably, in such a state of distraught and such anxiety? Would have been tragedy for the nation on the eve of the, millennium, bringing in 2000. It would have just been horrific all around. I mean, thank God, thank God, thank Ajit Doval, thank the negotiator, thank whoever it is that y'all came out. Unfortunately, there was one death, there was one murder, which is awful in itself, and I want to come to that. In your preface, you have said it bothered me no end that even in offices where information of a hijack incident should have been total and accurate, documents did not record the details of all personnel affected by the occurrence. What do you mean by this? Can you elaborate on this?
Yes, certainly. You know, after Mr. Ramni gave me it all, still have the diary, which is on which I had started noting very rapidly whatever he's saying, he was telling me about. Then the next stage came when I had to actually get information about them. And if you went, some of those colleagues were from Delhi, because Delhi-based flights were the maximum
Yeah.
targeted ones. And those people also didn't say, as I said, because they had been led to a situation where they were made to believe that, no big deal, if they got hijacked or something. So they've forgotten details about the kind of aircraft it was, and the registration of the aircraft, and their, even some of their fellow colleagues on board. So I went to the offices, the security office of Indian Airlines, and I feel very sorry when I say all this, because there are good people in security department,
Yeah.
and but they had no records of. They just had one-line statements at times about a particular episode, or they had just one name written, that of the commander. So all that disturbed me hugely, and I was determined, since it almost became some sort of a mission, a passion with me, that if I have to mention, all names must be found out.
Your chapter, I must admit, I have not finished reading it because it's quite intense, a book, and it's pretty frightening. So I haven't really finished it, but you do mention every single cabin crew. You mention you mention a lot of the passengers. You do, go a lot into detail and about the profession of some of the passengers, who, people who had lost, someone who had lost his mother and was going home, had needed to reach Delhi in time for her funeral, but of course he couldn't really make it. And, so many of these, you talk about the fine details, which it's important, right, to humanize something like this. It's very important. You also said in the preface that when you were flying in 2005, you came across, there was an ex-hijacker on your flight. Who was that?
The first ever hijack, in fact, they used to call it a skyjack that time,
Yeah,
happened affecting an Indian Airlines aircraft, was in 1971. There were
I read that.
two young boys who were, uh, I think, associates of the Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front, and
Right.
they were on board, and in the 1971 episode. Later,
Yes.
uh, I not very clear on that, when he was let go by the courts.
Qureshi, I think you mentioned someone as Qureshi.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm coming to that. So he was
Yes.
Hashim Qureshi, and
Yes.
Jammu has always been a very, a sensitive airport for us, for people flying out of it. I mean, take Indigo or SpiceJet or whichever the airline flies
Yeah.
out of Jammu today. So they'll be very, very particular about frisking, about going through the hand baggage and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And this guy apparently came on board, and he was seated in the business class, and he was very upset. He didn't even. We were greeting him. I was standing at the door, along with my female colleague, and we said, "Namaskar, sir," or whatever. He didn't answer. Then this guy from the commercial department at Jammu Airport, he came and whispered, "1971 ka hijack, rahi hai." And I almost froze. I mean, I was working on a book, and I should have been very happy to. I'm not saying that he would have been very delighted to meet me or somebody. He would have launched or given me his card and said, "Go come and talk to me." But the least I could have done was, okay, engage them, or maybe try taking a picture or something like that. As I've written that, I
Yeah.
just didn't have it in me to. So he was one of the two hijackers called Hashim Qureshi of the
He
1971
was
episode.
Hashim Qureshi.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Yes, I read that first hijack in 1971. I read that chapter. So how did I mean that? So clearly he wasn't in jail or wasn't incarcerated in any way. I mean, he was on a flight in 2005, and that too after having hijacked a plane in 1971. He was upset about being frisked.
Yeah, that's what
That's
you call irony.
ridiculous. That's crazy. You dedicate your book to Neerja Bhanot, who was sadly killed, the India born air hostess who was killed in 1986 in the hijack. and to Ripan Katyal, the young man from Gurgaon who was killed on IC814. Have you been in touch? Did you keep in touch with the Katyal family ever after that?
No, but I did commit, which I must own up on your program, a very, very, shall I say, inadvisable thing. I met Rachna, his wife.
Yes.
She had joined in. She was given a job by Indian Airlines, and I happened to cross her. I just met her, and I was passing by in the corridor, and I said, "Hello, Rachna." She says, "Hello." I said, "Do you remember me?" She says, "No." I said, "I see 814," and she, grimaced, and that's when I felt very, very sorry about my choice in having mentioned that, because for her, more than anybody else on board that day, for her it was going to be an incident which gave a scar which would never go away.
No, it's we all, you were in that situation together, and these things happen. One does say things like this. I mean, one can't be hard on yourself. But so you did meet her after that. I mean, it must have taken her a long time to recover. She was on a honeymoon, a lovely newlywed couple. That was just the most tragic, you know.
Yes,
Must have.
and the very fact that almost 6 nights after her husband's life was taken away brutally by those you know heavily indoctrinated terrorists, she didn't know, and she used to ask me, she used to ask others, as has been shown in the series, and hats off to their family. Of the family of Nethanis from Uttarakhand, and they used to sit by her side and try and console her or something, because she was very worried. Obviously, any person would be, and they kept saying that
Yeah.
he got off at Dubai and stuff like that. So it did must have hit her like a bolt from the blue, when it was disclosed to her, and it must have taken her superhuman effort to get her life back on the rails.
So I want to get to something, which is a bit, again, controversial. And I want to purely talk about your feelings and the human angle of it and what people must have been feeling. We hear a lot of people saying there are a lot of experts, a lot of self proclaimed experts also, who are now talking about the big so called blunder and the handling of the hijack. You know, especially what happened in Amritsar and then in releasing the terrorists and all that. And people talk about it very clinically, right? Um, Yes, like I said earlier, releasing Masood proved detrimental to India. He then founded Jaish-e-Mohammed, right, responsible for the parliament attacks and many other attacks. But what choice was there? But nobody is really seeing it from the point of view of passengers. I mean, I cannot even imagine the blind fear. It's easy when you're sitting in a comfortable living room or anywhere. It's easy to talk about sacrificing lives when it's not your own life or not your family member's life. I sometimes try and put myself in the shoes of people who are actually hostages. I mean, what goes through your mind? Hostages are not soldiers. An army personnel, a soldier will be ready to sacrifice their life. That is the duty to the nation. That is the job they have gone into willingly, where these things can happen. But a civilian flying from Kathmandu to Delhi, why should a civilian be ready to sacrifice their life? Why should, I mean, if I was sitting on the plane, I don't think I'd be saying, no, 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 I'm ready to sacrifice my life, don't release these terrorists. I don't think I would have been thinking like that. I mean, I don't think many people would. I mean, why should civilians be forced to become martyrs, is what I'm trying to say. It's very easy to have this debate from the comfort of your home. But having been on that plane, did you ever consider these things like, oh, this question? I mean, you probably didn't know negotiations were going on till later. But did you ever consider this whole question of like martyrdom and.
It's a very tricky field. We know about the pressure relatives had kind of exerted on the government. And I don't think the pressure was anything other than the speed at which the negotiations were going on. Some people felt that um, they were too slow and they wanted the thing, the standoff resolved in a jiffy, which never happens in such cases. And we also had counter pressure exerted by families of soldiers who had lost their lives in the Kargil War and in insurgency and counter-insurgency operations. And as a hostess, yes, it's very tough for me to do either of the two. Tough for me to not sympathize with them that okay they lost their lives. Tough for me to, as you rightly said, believe that I have it in me to take them on, and they've shown it in the series that the eight captain crew were planning to overpower the. Frankly, nothing of this kind happened really. I mean, if you're going to discuss this later, I'll dwell on that in greater detail later. And it was definitely a losing game for us. Initially when we were overpowered, and um, I mean, the aircraft and the passengers and crew on board were truly overpowered in a sense, in the literal and figurative sense. We felt that it's going to take a day and a half maximum for it to get resolved. Once we reached Kandahar and we came to know we were in Afghanistan, it was a part of your courage gave way. And as I said earlier, that step by step we were uh, getting very pessimistic about our own future. And there came a point in time when I felt that, especially on the events when 29th, towards the time this happened, that when they took people away, I felt that I don't think I would make it back to India alive. Then
Oh.
what would happen to my family if my body were to come in a coffin or something like that. Then when this happened on the 30th, when he said ki shoot cutting and all that, that time, believe me, I still remember very clearly. That was as if you'd given up. That you just left it to God that, okay, I don't know what's going to happen. So when this guy Burger came on the morning of 30th and says ki Sharma Sahab, that's what he used to say, that they never asked us to serve for some reason, I don't know why. He says अपने colleagues को बता दीजिए कि सर्विस कर दें. That's when I told him, I said, बगल आपने एक तरफ बोला कि मार देंगे, दूसरी तरफ आप कह रहे हो कि कर दें. मैंने कहा कौन बेवकूफ़ खाएगा इस वक्त. And I was very upset. He said मेरी बात मानिए, आप करवाइए, मैं लंच आपके साथ खाऊंगा. So, but still, one wasn't sure that can this man's word be trusted, or will he backtrack, and which, in I guess they would have if things hadn't worked out the way they did on the 30th. So never felt that you just felt that you were a proper hostage, you were a proper victim, and you had utterly no choice. You didn't have ammunition with you to take them on. They were highly uh, motivated people. They were on a mission to kill or die if it didn't work out their way. And they were, judging from the kind of physique they had, the way they would run from one end of the aircraft to another, and they were solid people. They had probably they trained in martial arts or something like that, and the kind of training that we were no match for them anyway. As you said, that I don't think we could have. We were just been easy target for them.
Yes, no, that of course. But I mean, surely many passengers, surely the focus was to stay alive. I'm sure there was not many passengers there were thinking that, okay, if I have to die, I'll be a martyr. I'm sure the focus was to kind of get out alive. I mean, that was probably the hope. That
I
hope was
agree.
always there.
I agree with you.
What did your family members go through while you were? I mean, you must have obviously discussed it with them later. Or were they completely shattered?
Initially they said that the aircraft is missing. That was the message they got from the office. So my brother-in-law, ex-army man, He happened to be in Delhi, so they called up again, and they found out obviously the lines were not easy to get. Communication was pretty poor that those days. Then they said, "Oh, it's been hijacked." So as the news spread around, a lot of people flocked to our home, and I was to learn later. My father, as I told you, was lying paralyzed.
Yeah.
My mother was a brave woman. She said that कोई अपशगुन नहीं हुआ है, हम खाना बनाएंगे भी और खाएंगे भी और उसके लिए प्रार्थना करेंगे. And so she said that as the days went by, they started becoming a little worried, anxious, concerned about safety of the passengers and me also in particular because they were directly related to me. So my wife told me that she didn't even get a chance to because people, had to be polite. You had to be maybe offer a cup of tea to people who came. So she would go to the bathroom and cry. Now that is when it touched me. This thing, because how do you have to? The kids, my kids were my boys' sons were small. One was about 9 years, one was 11 years, and stuff like that. So it was tough on her. Even after I came back and after my father passed away, and initially I took to drinking. I was trying to drown my sorrow or stuff like that.
No, right, right. Don't downplay someone else's grief, and for people like that, I'm sure, the they were also relieved when negotiations ended the way they did, even though terrorists had to be released. I'm sure family members were like, we just want our loved ones back, and unless you're in that situation, you'll never know how someone feels. That's why a lot of like self-proclaimed experts who very clinically discuss these things. I don't know if they've ever been in such a situation. So it's very easy
May you
to
never
talk.
be.
Yeah, I hope they'll never be, but it's very easy to talk about sacrificing lives when it's not your own. But coming to what about like post traumatic stress? Do you think you've fully healed now? Did it take you very long to heal? Did it take therapy? I mean, you continued flying, right?
Once my father passed away, I told them, I said, I'm not in a frame of mind to fly. And Indian Airlines um was a very, very kind, generous organization. And it was manned by good managers at that point in time. I didn't have to go for any formal therapy, so to say. And there were times in later years when you would find a passenger behaving oddly on board. He's not talking to somebody. He's oddly dressed or something, and you would suddenly find yourself almost involuntarily looking at him
Right.
very suspiciously, and the bargain, get very anxiety prone. But
Yeah.
but slowly the number of such
Slowly that goes away.
instances
Yeah.
kept decreasing.
Few instances you mention in your book. You mention about how you and Satish, who's other person, I think, how you were asked to come in front, and then you were asked to dispose of the body of Mr. Katyal, and you didn't even know that a passenger died, but you had to physically lift his body, and I mean that is just, I mean, it's nerve wracking. I cannot even imagine. It's horrific.
If I may take a minute or two for that, that was the first indication that things had really become very, very scary. I didn't know that he had been attacked so savagely by those people. Satish had attended to him, but Satish thought that he would pull through and he would survive. And we lifted his body and placed it on the stepladder outside, and with all the respect that we could have, because one knows what death can mean to the people
Yeah.
who we left behind. And it's been shown a little insensitively in the series, if I may refer to it like that they almost throw the body. That wasn't the case. So, but
The
it's
case
just
was
one.
you lifted up the body and
We
took
lifted
it.
and
Yeah.
placed the body on the step ladder outside the aircraft. After which the doors were closed and Shortly thereafter, we took off from Al Minad.
Yes, in Al Minhad. And then you say something else. I'm going to read, I copied a passage. You said that I think Shankar or one of the terrorists told Rajani, one of the air hostesses, that आप इधर आइए ज़रा मेरे जूते के लेसेस बांध दीजिए मेरे हाथ में ग्रेनेड. You witnessed that happening. I
Yes.
mean, and she bent down and she tied his shoelaces.
Yeah.
And he had a grenade in one hand.
Yeah, he said the pin is out or something like that, and in any case, it was a command which had to be followed. I guess
Yeah.
Rajni did what the situation demanded at that time, even if it was demeaning for her, but she was being brave at that point in time.
Not forget demeaning, it's just terrifying, I mean, I guess these are instances that the show doesn't. And even there were, you mentioned in your book how you were frisked, you were reading that magazine, the in-flight magazine, and then they picked you up and frisked you and said, don't move, or kuch hoshiyari mat karo, we'll shoot you or whatever. I mean,
They took me to the same class where the bodies they assaulted people and searched me because simply because they found me too fidgety.
no, so that you mentioned these, and I was reading it, and like I said, like my hair stands on end when I read things like this. So, do you feel coming to the series? I mean, after reading all these instances in your book, these weren't obviously you can't show everything in the series, and yeah, I guess there's something like cinematic license or whatever. But do you feel they've underplayed how horrible the experience was for the passengers? And do you think they've kind of humanized these terrorists? What's your personal opinion?
My personal opinion is yes, it could have been worked harder upon, by the makers. They could have, as I said, that the will of the passengers was broken step by step. They could have shown more of that. They've tried their bit, if I may say, a little generously, that like the family is being, assaulted, the men being assaulted, and Ripun's wife, you know, becoming almost impatient to to get some news about her husband who had been taken away. These sort of incidents have not been glossed over, but as the book says, that they there was plenty more to it, and at least in the first few, not to come to that the humanizing something. In the first few uh, hours and days, there was nothing human about them. Once they stood up in the cabin, we saw the most vicious side of them. They assaulted my colleague Satish. They banged into a trolley and it spilled over. It's when the relief flight came that their attitudes started becoming a little. So they started reaching out and did this Antakshari bit. Frankly, I don't remember that Antakshari bit. I remember the fact that they asked people to sing songs or narrate jokes. There was this incident when they took two foreigners to the J class and said they would shoot when Taliban said that if you kill any person, we'll attack you.
Right.
This was the reality. This is what had to be borne in mind. This
Yeah.
has to be borne in mind as well when you before you give them any certificates of
Right,
decency.
right. Right. No, so on, but seems to me like hijackers, from reading your book and a few other instances, hijackers move between terrifying and then suddenly becoming a little friendly and then terrifying again. It seems to be a very deliberate strategy.
They were alternating between horror and humor, which is it was a very carefully planned strategy. They were trying to, pin us down psychologically.
Right.
That one moment you're being nice to somebody, one moment you're being harsh. So
Yes.
that's there's no better way than this to break somebody completely.
It was psychological warfare on their part. Like one passenger even said that it was psychological warfare. Another instance you say in your book is when one passenger had to get home because his mother had passed away, and when they were offloading some passengers in Al Minhad airstrip in the UAE, he asked Burger or Doctor, one of them, and then that person consulted the other terrorist, and he said, "So what if your mother's passed away? So many of our people have died for our cause, you know." So that kind of behavior. So
Ghaziabad based gentleman called Anami Swaroop. I still remember very, very clear that incident because the moment he said that my mother has passed away, um, I thought probably he was trying to, kind of think of a kind of, using a excuse or something. But one look at his face convinced me that he was actually very, very traumatized by the demise of
yeah.
his mother, and then the turn of events.
Yes.
And I remember how these guys were so dismissive कि हमारे बहुत से आदमी मरे पड़े हैं वहाँ पे तो क्या है वो है, and that poor guy had to um, endure. I mean, how look at his emotions, how he must have managed uh, till the end of the flight, end of the crisis.
Did you try and pacify any passengers? I mean, did you get a chance at that time to interact, or you all had to be blindfolded and head down and things like that?
Yeah, there were times, and to be fair, a lot of my female colleagues, they were also reaching out because they were the ones who were serving, and they were doing a tough job. And there were times when we didn't have enough vegetarian food. There were times when we just didn't have enough food. Vegetarian was, this thing is another matter. And the way they went around rationing, identifying people who needed more, people whose blood sugar levels were dropping, and something. It was a tough
Right.
task. There were times when I also had to, I remember this guy called Romesh Grover. We were offering fruits, and he says, "No, no, I don't eat quinoa." So I said, "You got to survive, man. Come on, you're looking very low." That sort of stuff. Then there's a wonderful gentleman called UB Bhatt from Bangalore, and one day he had a low moment, and he started accusing us of uh, not being fair to him. So I told him, I said, it's not a daily Bombay flight that you can start criticizing. You must realize our problem. There was another guy who was one day saying that why you guys being conjuice about water when we didn't have enough water. So these kind of things were, but every single moment, one would almost naturally go back to the person and say, look, I'm sorry. You know what we are going through.
My God. But like you said, probably the most frightening moment was when they announced that they're going to shoot everyone one by one.
Yes, it was. It was terrifying because there was absolute silence, and in the entire this thing, and we heard a thud sound. Somebody had fallen. He had to be revived.
Fainted.
And sorry,
Someone fainted.
yeah, and
A passenger. Yeah.
no, yes, yes, very much. And then another lady became almost hysterical. She said, "Shoot me, shoot all of us!" And but then this guy, Burger, came and asked me, "कि दरवाज़ों के बारे में ज़्यादा कौन जानता है?" So we were quiet. We didn't know what was going on. So then I said, "मैं जानता हूँ," and I'm not being heroic or something. This is the way exactly it happened. So he took me to the last door and he says, if you were to open this, what would happen? So I told him in this position, the doors were armed. I said there'll be alarm sign and beep, beep, beep kind of a stuff with red light flashing. And the escape slide will be deployed. He says, Jaiye. Then sometime
He
later he
said
came and
what?
the escape slide will be deployed.
Yes.
That's what you call that shoot
Yes, yes, yes. The inflatable slide. Yes.
precisely. So
Yeah.
that automatically gets deployed if you open it in open the door in an armed position.
Yes.
So then he came and said, ask your colleagues to serve. That's when what I've already told you about that. But it
Yes,
was scary,
yes.
because we didn't know what would happen thereafter, and a lot of people didn't eat, obviously. But
Yeah.
fortunately, it didn't last long. I think a few hours later they came and announced that deal ho gayi hai. But
A few hours, but that's still a few hours of that insane
Yeah, yeah,
trauma.
obviously.
Last couple of questions, sir. One lady who was recently interviewed a few days ago spoke about how Burger gave her a shawl and signed. She also spoke about how one or two of the hijackers were giving sermons on, the virtues of Islam and trying to convert passengers. And in her interview, this lady says some people were convinced. Do you remember these sermons?
The sermons happened in the early part of the hijack. I don't recall the date. Probably it was Sunday, the 26th, or Monday, the 27th, when this
Okay.
Shalwala guy was Burger, by the way, and the chap who delivered those sermons was being addressed as Doctor. So he gave a very longish sermon, and he spoke about Quran, and he says it has a lot of good uh, message for all human beings who read it. And if we have done something which is not good, it's probably because we haven't understood the message and all that. I implore you to read it or something like that. But that's about all. I don't think I don't remember at least. He's saying that you must convert or stuff
Okay.
like that.
Thank you so much, Anil ji. You've given so many details. It's probably not easy for you to say all this, and a lot of old wounds resurface, but you have dealt with it very bravely. And I would recommend your book to those who want to know more about it. But if you could leave the audience with, a coping mechanism when one goes through this kind of trauma, what kind of coping mechanism did you use, and how would you advise people? What would you advise people?
I would say believe in God, have faith, and dig out reserves of courage that you have. But look ahead. I would say that ultimately, God, the one who brought you this far, will take you further as well. Is what my firm belief is. And when everything else, the times when everyone feels that all else is lost, nobody coming to my rescue, my friends have let me down. But have a firm belief God never does. In some form or the other, He'll send you somebody who's never expected to show up, and um, you know, even when you hit rock bottom, the only uh, place you can, the only course that you can take is upwards. You can only come up
Right.
after that. So that's where
Yes.
God is supreme.
Yes, absolutely. Rock bottom can be a foundation for you to rebuild your life. Thank you for leaving us with this message, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Anushka ma'am.
Thank you for coming
Very,
on Buzz
very
Light.
engaging interview. You well informed. You've done such a lot of hard work on reading the book. God bless you and your channel. Success everywhere. Stay healthy.
Thank
Stay
you.
happy.
Stay safe. Thank you. Okay.